So a couple of days on, and I did indeed go to 6. What I wanted to talk about was just, firstly, you'll notice that actually the bunkers and where they're laid are a bit different to where they were originally. I looked at I originally had one here, I think, and I didn't have this one at the back. This one was slightly smaller, this one didn't exist. It was just like you could miss long or left. Basically, it looked like a green surrounded by bunkers and not particularly layered. I tend to try with my par 3s to create one side where it looks like there's more danger, and then the other one it looks maybe less dangerous, but it has more. So in this case, you're taking on the bunkers on the left hand side, but actually the false front means you'll probably want to be hitting left, and you're going to get more benefit from going left. So I wanted to start with another one of the par 3s, mainly because we're still in the stage where we're deciding about 19. So I want to be sure that the others are going to have enough character, and I think this one does. This is the one that I was doubtful on. What I've spent a lot of time doing is the tree line. So again, just spending time getting that environment right, the kind of the heights of trees and things like that. It's looking a little bit bitty at the moment, but once I flesh out the undergrowth, I think it will work well. Then the main feature of this hole was the uphill nature of it, and what I've done is just sculpted all the bunkers and things around it. Haven't actually playtested this one at all yet, so we're going to have a look at that in a second. I'll still tweak it, and you playtest really for like seeing different parts of the course and working out, if I land here, is it blind, does it look how I expect, those sorts of things. So yeah, this is like a mid-iron, and the idea is going to be a really steep back to front green. And actually I could go a little bit more severe on this if I want to. So if I do want to do that, the way to do it is going to be to take the raise tool, go into this and make it really, really big, and just increase by like a foot here. Won't really make much of a change at ground level. Maybe a little bit, but to the green that'll do a lot in terms of how it plays. So if I click there, you'll notice the difference in slope colour. The idea being that you're going to want to try to leave the ball below the hole, but a lot of the trouble is front. So runoffs, bunkers, etc. We're now at the stage where I know that this looks about right. How does it play? And then are the green slopes too severe? We can mess around with those. The bunkers and things are all sculpted, but they'll get a final look over as well. The first thing I'm noticing is actually the lighting isn't ideal where I'd set this. For this hole it's very bright, which actually means that you can't see the bunkering that I want you to see as much. As let's say we moved it around here, well, you can see the shape's much better. Into there it's a little bit bright. Now, might be that that's just a trade-off we have to make. That'll be one that I kind of look at as we go. Otherwise, I like it. I like the way this bunker sits. Yeah, looks pretty good from the tee. The tree line looks really good. Very happy with it. I'm not sold on whether I need this tee box or if I can just bring planting in here. So actually I might lose that one. Underbrush coming out here, so scrub like areas and stuff. Might do some around here, or might do grassy bits. I'm not sure. We'll see. As I kind of fly over, I'll look and see whether are there bunkers popping into view. So like, if so, do I want them blind? So like that back left one is a little bit blind. I'm okay with that. The one right at the back is totally blind. I am very much okay with that. Alright, let's hit a shot. Okay. Might miss the bunker. Oh no, we're in. Okay, so now we're looking and going, is this kind of how I expect it to be? The first thing it's feeling to me is that, yeah, this bunker could be down a little bit more at the back. It's okay, but I think we could be dropping this area a couple of feet probably. As a shot though, this is a nightmare. I've got a bunker shot to a green that flows away from me. The other thing you might notice is these little crinkly red hedges where the slope is just diving off a little bit. Some of that's unavoidable. I can sort some of it. It's a bit of a trade-off there. Oh, that needed to hit the hole. I'll see what sort of putt we've got. So it's up a foot and a bit, which for that distance of putt is quite a lot. So that's not going to get there, is it? Cool, so this plays about as I would want it to. So I might now go through and play all 4 pins and see how they work, see whether the slopes are too severe. I think with that one we didn't really get to test it, but I'm immediately going to go through and lower bits here. So with that one, it's really that's what playtesting for me is about. It's finding those bits that just don't quite look right, that you may not, because this is in shadow, I wouldn't really spot until actually I played into it. Something like that, but then am I happy with how that looks? Far less so. I think I need to lower this bit as well. And then it's, am I happy with that, because that just doesn't look quite right. So I'm going to mess with this a little bit more. It's going to take more than just a couple of quick sculpts. So you've heard me talk about this before, but a lot of this project is about coming up with holes in tandem, and rather than building out one hole fully, it's been on a plot this tight. Remember, we've got that 1000 by 1000 box. It's working out how your green site intersects with the next tee and all of those sorts of things. Now, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about the importance of measure tools for things like this, because I'll spend so much time just dabbling with this tool before I really lay a surface down. The first thing we're going to talk about is sight lines. Now, when you've got a real focal point of a hole like we've got on 14, which you might remember I created this one so that this was always going to be in my mind as to this hole has really big views over the entirety of the rest of the plot. If you look at the measure tool kind of telling us elevation change, we go down to about 65 odd feet below, 67 at one point down here, so it looks all the way over, and then you've got this gentle slope of the property, meaning that we can create big views off it. What I also want to do though with a lot of this course is have each hole feel like it's in its own little environment, but then explode out onto those big views. So the hole itself, you'll see bits of it, and when you hit the green, that's where I've used this trick, which is one of BS Petty 24's, and that's basically creating these little cones of vision with measure tools. So anything, I've decided I want you to see this green, or at least that bit of this green, because it houses this tee as well. So we're going to therefore make sure our tree lines stay well away from here. And I might be able to extend that a little bit further, it depends, but that's the bit I really want you to see. I then want you to see over this kind of bunker and have the widest view over here, because I really want you to have a reminder of that first and 10th hole you've already played. Same here, I want you to be able to, having spent a bit of time planting this little area, I want that to be a focal point. There's no point, let's say we created a view over this bit, it's kind of pointless because it's just fairway, it doesn't look anything special. So you want to really direct the player's eyes to the bits that you've spent time working on. We're then going to get a big view over 16 green, which I need to work on a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a second. You'll get 18 green, which I've mapped out. You'll again see how the measure tools have gone, and you then get a view to the clubhouse as well. So from this green you're going to be able to see loads. You're also going to be able to see 15T just here, really close, or here. And depending on where the pin is, let's say pin's here and you're putting from here, you might get a little bit of a view of the whole of 15 as well. And that might be something I try to manufacture a little bit more with pin positions. For example, if I put a pin right here, it's a good, well, not a good pin there, I'd soften that slope. But there are a few people who are going to go left of that without bailing out, and if they do go left, they're likely not stopping short of the pin. The benefit of that is you can set up a little putting view going this way, which might open up that hole as well. So loads to think about in terms of, let's just try to manufacture some of those big views as much as we can without it feeling forced, but you put the player in the positions you want them to look, basically. Now I can also try with this one, it depends how I want to go with my planting, but there's going to be a really big bunker on the inside of 17 here. I think so. Maybe we see if we can craft a little bit of a line to that one as well. And at this point I start thinking, well, maybe I want you to be able to see just a touch more of that, and then we might move that tree, because if we go back to the tee, is that tree an absolute must where it is, or could it move this way just a little bit? It could probably move. So what I might go and do now is just take those two, move them this way a little bit, and that creates that bigger sightline through to this hole, which I think will work much better. Now, the second thing I want to talk about with measure tools is again on that thinking point of view. So going through, I'm trying to work out how 16 green is going to sit, because you'll notice that it's really tight to 14 green, which we just built out. 60-70 yards isn't too small or short, but if I decide that you're going to be, I want bunkers down this side for example, then maybe I need a little bit more space to be working with. I've also got this tee here to think about, so I've really got to get this hole locked in pretty soon and make sure that it all makes sense, because if I leave myself squashing this in, it's kind of an awkward distance anyway. It's 526 yard par 5, so it's pretty short, but it's got to work, it's got to make sense. I also need to be visualizing how I want that to work and how I want the land to go before I finish doing this one, because if I want this green, say, up on a plateau, like, I don't know, let's say we put it up 5 feet or so, well, how's that going to interact with 14 before I even finish it? Does it make sense? Does it block off the view on 17T? It's hard to get the camera angle quite right. All of these sorts of things you've got to bear in mind with how you're doing it. Then we look at back here, is that going to work from here? Kind of hard to see with the measure tools, but you get the idea. It's to what extent will this fit? Now, coming back to the measure tools, I know how I want this hole to play, and really what I want to do is going to be very subtle. I want to force you to try to hit a fade off the tee. Now, trying to force people to hit draws or fades is really tricky to do in game, and the first step you'll notice I spent ages on, if you ever watch one of my design streams, is I spend a load of time with the measure tool before even laying down a surface. So I'll go through something like this and then delete, purely based on how I think it looks, because measure tools, the joy of them is you can just do that and it's all gone, and you can hit undo and it comes back. So at any point you've got this visual representation, you can just clear them out. It's far quicker than trying to delete a spline or redo a spline, because you can just delete certain bits and go again. Now, all of this then, it does take a bit of time to get the experience to do this, but I'm basing this on, well, two things. One, if you hit dead straight with the longest driver, you're going to have to hit a slightly partial shot, or you're possibly running out of fairway. Particularly if you're too greedy, and I really want it to be if you try to shoot this gap and hit it straight without fading it, then you're going out the edge, which might feel a little bit tricked up. So it's going to be really hard to manage that. So a lot of what I'm doing is just drawing shapes with the fairway. So for example, bits I do like and bits I don't. I feel it goes a bit wide out here. So now you might experiment with, well, what if you drew the fairway this way? But I do want it to be quite wide if you are laying back. So if you hit a 3-wood, for example, which could be a really good play, you're probably going to run to about 271, and you're not totally taking the green out of play, but 3-wood could be a good way to play this hole. I want to keep that as an option. It's if you're hitting driver dead down to this neck, then I want you being worried. So a lot of that is then, well, do I want to allow a little bit more space further out this way? So I might decide to play around with lengthening this, and then you look at where this measure tool is, and then look up at the top. Well, how far is that to the green? How far is that to the tee? 328 might be that if you're hitting the longest driver, you're also down 33 feet, so that's probably running through. But those hitting the 285, 280 drivers, you're probably going to be okay. Then we start looking at the fairway from this side, and I don't really like that little appendage. It feels like it makes no sense, so I probably wouldn't do that. At this point I start going, well, delete, and it is a little bit tedious trying to do it this way, but if you don't want to lose all of them, that can be a nice way of doing it. So what I'll now spend probably a good half an hour doing is just sketching a fairway that I like the look of, that I think works. I still think I need maybe a bit more space out here, so what if we draw it that way a little more? How does that look? I think that looks a bit better, rather than it cutting in. It gives, and you'll notice these changes are tiny, but I really think that they make a huge difference in visually getting the player to do what you want. So here, having just given that extra little bit of width, well, it doesn't look like much, but it looks like the fairway is not cutting across as sharply, which maybe means people are more likely to hit a 3-wood down there. I also want to be careful it's not encroaching too much with this hole. So now I'm going to look at 12, spin round and go, does the fairway look like it makes sense from here? I think it does. We also then notice the huge elevation change. There's a massive camber on this hole, which is part of how I want it to play. So even if you're hitting a 3-wood, you're taking it down this side. If you're bailing out this way, problem is that's still 3 foot of elevation change, which means if I'm hitting here, I'm probably running through. So really, what's your playable area of fairway for this one? Probably kind of this sort of area. And this bit is not unplayable, but you're running into issues. So a load of it, I'll be thinking about stuff like this and going, well, do I want to make this side of the fairway flat so that if you bail, your punishment is just having a long shot in? I think that's probably what I want to do. I don't really want people to be hitting a fast 3-wood and running out. But I do want people who are hitting a fast driver to be punished. So all of this is really balancing everything that you do and just taking ages before you lay down some surfaces. What I'd probably then do is just lay down a really rough fairway surface, like maybe 7 or 8 spline points, probably a few more, 15, 16, just around this area, and just play test and see, does the ball do what I want it to do? Then you start playing with it from there. But once I've got this bit right, because the tee shot was what I wanted to define this hole most of all, I'm going to try to reward the player who really carries the corner and tries to hit a fade around those trees. So if you can, and that's what this tree is there for, it's designed to work visually so that you're trying to cut a drive around it or hit a slow or something along those lines and try to sneak up here, and then suddenly you've got a massive difference of maybe 90 yards between whether you've played it conservatively or not. And then we try to reward that on the second shot. So normally I'd say kind of take the green and work backwards. In this case the tee shot is so specific and so fiddly. That's where we're going to start. Okay, so a short while later and you can see what we've got. We've roughed the fairway in. It's by no means finalised, but it gives you an idea of how it will work. There's a couple of things to factor in. I haven't really done the sculpting to check that sightlines and that work yet. We've had to create that little bit of separation between these two. That needs to be dressed up a bit more with planting. And there are still a couple of areas that have been changed based on where other holes were from how I might otherwise design this hole. So for example, we're going to have a bunker here that serves no real strategic purpose, but it is going to be visual on this hole, gives you something breaking up the right hand side, and it also separates this hole from this one, whereas if it were just heavy rough you might have the ball bouncing through a little bit more. From here we'll see how that works. It might mean reworking the land a little bit more, so raising this bit up a touch, but that would at least fit with this land. It just changes slightly how this hole will look. Additionally, we've, I think, worked this side. The camber is still there, but it's a little less severe, and what I'm now going to end up doing is just play testing to make sure that it works the way I want to, and then tweaking around that. I might at this stage just drop down some bunkers purely as kind of placeholder shapes, so we might do one there, and so forth. And the reason I'll just do simple shapes where we just drag and move them around is because they're very easy to move. If I decide that that bunker's too far out, for example, what we can do is just go in, select them all, and then just move it further in or move it up or what have you. It also gives a good visual. If I'm looking over 14, I can see where that's going to be, even though I haven't properly done the shapes, etc. So that's the next stage, and then we start getting into working on it. Now you then start thinking, is there anything that might still need adapting over the course of the rest of the holes? I'm finding I've got a lot of greens that are kind of like this, narrower at the front, wider at the back, and where you've got bunkers cut in on this side. So I might start looking on the other holes and work out if I can do something a little bit different. Certainly 8, I think I'm going to go for a green that's wider than it is long. That would be one that definitely helps. And we'll look and see what we can do on other holes as well. That's just one. I don't think anyone would notice that, but it's one niggling thought that when you know the course as well as you do whilst designing it, those are the sorts of things that you pick up. So in terms of attention to detail, the next thing I want to show is a little bit how I do bunkers. So with this sort of sandbelt course, the bunker shapes are not everything, but pretty close. And so you'll spend ages trying to get these nice curvy, sort of irregular shapes. But what a lot of people might not realise when you're doing contest courses is how much goes into that. So here you'll see that I've traced out that. You've got to find a way to make that work. And also this fairway into bunker transition, if we do that with shapes, then it just won't work anywhere near as well. So we have to do it with splines, which makes life even trickier. So if you see here, we've got a shape. If we move that over it, it's just not going to go in because the game is weird. So we're having to do it with splines, which gets really finicky. You need loads of points and you have to adjust them like crazy. So what we're going to end up doing now is just try to move them around slowly but surely to get that sort of a shape that we want. And it might end up being a combination of spline points and shapes. I won't go through all of this. I'll kind of fast forward and come back in a second. But you can see how we roughly go about doing this, and it's trying to just move spline points around in a way that if you were coming up with a shape on the fly, you never would do it like this. But that's kind of how we figure through it. Short while later, and it's probably been about 5 minutes of adjusting spline points, and this is what we've got. Now you'll notice as the path goes round, it makes so little sense. Like this one's going there, that one's going all the way over there, and essentially what you're doing is just moving points around to make the shape that you want. Can tidy up that a little bit more, and then move that one out a touch, and it gives you roughly an idea. So we've now matched pretty close to the spline points. One of the things I have done up here is use a couple of shapes. I've taken this oval, more the circle brush, and made it as ovular as I can, so you kind of get a sharpish edge, and that will just then be putting final little tweaks that you can't quite do with splines. So those go in. Now, to what extent does this matter? Probably not a huge amount, but I think with again we come back to like, why are we doing a contest course? You want it to stand out, and for me the bunkers on this sort of course are going to be pretty close to the everything on it. And actually I don't like those two bits. And if you're on PC and you can go into this camera mode, it's a really good way of being able to kind of just quickly erase measure tools. I'll sculpt all the bunkers before or shape all the bunkers fully before I sculpt them. And it's going to be, a lot of them's doing the overhead view, but also considering, how they look from the line the player's coming in on. So this one's maybe a touch big. We'll see how that works with planting. It might be one that works, might be one that needs downsizing a touch. Because I don't think I want that one being giant. I do want this one breaking up the fairway a bit. I'm also going to now extend this fairway round even further. So we talked about that editing process before, and you can see that this fairway has changed quite dramatically. It continues to happen, and each time you make a little change or you put a bunker down, you've got to consider whether that fits in with how you want everything else to work. So in this case, well, suddenly having this bunker there, you're going to want to run the fairway right up towards it so that it looks like it's a bit more at home. See, immediately I feel that bunker, now that it's not detached from the fairway, looks a little bit better. If we can plant in this area, maybe it works even more. The other thing I then find is, well, this fairway now looks very wide, and what we can do is bring the fairway in a touch on this side, and that will help again create some spacing between this hole and that 14th, that downhill par 3 on the right hand side. So all of it is going to be working with what you've got, trying to amend things, make sure that every tweak you're making, not only does it make sense for the hole that you're working on, but does it fit with everything else around it. And really, I think the courses that have the most success in this sort of format, when you're going to have people critiquing everything about it, are the ones where the designer has kind of considered everything from multiple different angles and worked out whether it makes sense. So there's still a ton of space over this side on the right hand side. Kind of want to allow this as a layup, but we could put a bunker in there. Might work quite nicely for framing, but I also quite like the idea of leaving it pretty empty. This will be one where I see this whole right hand side, it's not crucial to the hole, because with a par 5 as short as this is, people are going to go for the green most of the time anyway. So this sort of bailout area, very few people are laying up with a 7-iron, I don't think. But you want to make sure that it's playable and it makes sense. I've decided also, I think I haven't talked about this yet, I wanted to change the green because I felt I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's kind of similar, but it's now going to flow front to back, so you can roll it on. It's a bit more of a just gentle oval shape, rather than I was finding I was getting a lot of those, particularly when I started looking back over the last few. This one had a bunker dug in left and was that kind of narrow at front, wide at back. This one was not, it was similar-ish, but not enough difference. Same with this one, although that one's very different in length. I felt I wanted this one to be slightly different from where I planned it, and I wanted to leave the whole of the right side open for a bit of a bailout rather than surround. One of the things I wanted to do was show you roughly how this is working. So the first thing I'll do is shape out, put the shape roughly down, and I'll spend ages with the measure tool trying to get the shapes exactly where I want them to be. But you'll see they still don't look great until you sculpt them. Then this comes with a really big warning. You should not do bunkers like this. They are really difficult, and it only fits one particular type of course, which is this one. The next thing I'll do is do the big land moves. I mean, this one isn't really going to be in play, it's more just for separation between this hole and 16. So what I'll do next is just do big land moves, and these are with soft brushes. Everything I'm going to do with this pretty much is raise. And now the tricky bit. For the edges of these bunkers, we want them coming down really sharply but not tearing the land, and that's tricky to do. It took a lot of trial and error, but the way I found it is going to this brush, kind of making it roughly fit different areas of the bunkers and dropping by about a foot. And it might look like it will tear here, but I think it's usually okay. Yes, you see it's gone slightly darker there. We're trying to avoid that shadow, is what I'm referring to by tearing. I'll kind of keep going with this, and a lot of the time, one thing that I would recommend taking from this, I'm not looking at the inches, even though we got them back. I'm not looking at that at all. I think the main thing is really to look at what the land is doing underneath the brush. So I'm kind of moving the edge of the blue brush, going up and down, well, just to try to get it roughly where I think it needs to be. Mostly I'm looking for trying to get it relatively level at the bottom, whilst still creating that bit of depth that we don't have currently. This one we're going to push it out so that it reaches that corner. So that's why I wouldn't look at the feet or inches, because really it's all one click in a process rather than one click and you're done. Whereas I think if you get into inches and go, well, I've got to lower everything 10 inches, that might prove problematic. Now I might at some point switch to this brush, and that's because we want there's a certain area which is just like one specific part which is just too high, so we might lower that. And as we go with this, the bunker might take on slightly different characteristics to how originally envisioned. And that's fine. The fingers actually in sandbar bunkers, unlike most you'll see on TGC where they're really raised, these ones tend to drop down into the bunkers. So we do that as well, which is good. It makes, I think that's to do with like the soil in the bunker or the sand sticking together and just keeping firm and allowing the bunker to hold its shape. As you can see, we're kind of getting a little closer. You'll notice that the front of the bunker is now pretty high compared to the actual sand within it, so we're going to drop it in, and that's going to have the dual purpose of balls rolling near it will feed into it, which is how you want them to play. For these bunkers, you want them really to play bigger than their actual footprint. You want balls to roll into them from a little way. Now we're on the fuzzy brush, which is where I've kind of got the bigger slopes in. Doing this one pretty quickly actually. I'm not intending this one really being in play. So I'm not saying I don't have to worry about it as much, but fewer people are going to end up in it for sure. So actually, it's not going to be quite as crucial. So I'm probably going to look at it from the area where I'm expecting you to hit from, which is this landing area here. Now, the one problem we might have with this one is that it is just a little too sunken. So I'm toying with the idea at this point of raising it up a little bit more so that you can see, touch more of it. At this point I'm not sure I love the shape. So I'm trying to think, if you're playing from here, what are you looking at? And it looks a little bit too face on for my liking. It's hard to explain with some of this stuff. You kind of get used to seeing, you get very used to critiquing your own courses. So this one might be one that we come back to doing again, and there might not be anything wrong with it per se. I don't think there is, but I'm not loving it in the way that I'd like to, and certainly in the way that I really, really love these ones. So maybe this one gets another look.